We spent a lot of time, half a year, doing that. And I knew she had other issues, like infections, and I could sense the mold that she was probably dealing with still. But I was like, you know, it's not going to do you any good if we dive into that without addressing the stress and trauma.
Yeah.
So we did that, and I mean, literally it was like a 9-day difference in terms of her responses to the other interventions that we did.
All right, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Shit You Don't Learn in College. Today, we've got my good buddy, Justin Janoska. Now, Justin is a clinician and the founder of the Autoimmune Revolution, helping women reverse their autoimmune issues through lifestyle changes. He holds a master's in nutrition and specializes in overcoming diseases like Hashimoto's, IBD, PCOS, and many more, and has worked with hundreds of women to do what many doctors have told them they couldn't: overcome these debilitating diseases. Now, in this episode, we're going to dig deep onto your health and what autoimmune actually is and how it comes about, how to properly understand it and why it's on the rise, the factors that have the greatest effect on our health and how to heal our bodies. We're going to talk about the mind-body connection and how it plays a factor in our physical health, and how to start healing yourself if you have one of these diseases. All right. Now, if you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button and let me know you enjoyed it, and comment below if you want me to cover something specific in a future interview. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button below so you never miss a great video. I'll see you in there. How's it going, everybody? Zander Fryer, CEO and founder of High Impact Coaching, and your host for Shit You Don't Learn in College. And we're back with another great episode. Today I've got my good buddy Justin Janoska on. Justin, welcome to the show.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, dude. I was just joking about, you know, quarantine really caused you to stop working out. Your biceps are looking pretty small.
You find a way.
You're fine. You're just lifting desks and shit. Like
dead tree branches.
Dead tree branches.
Yeah.
Dude, so for everybody out here who doesn't know who Justin is, I'd love for everybody to get a behind the scenes on you. You're one of the top health and wellness experts out there, and personally one of the people, you know, when I think of like really being knowledgeable around what it takes to be healthy and you know, like that's part of being successful in life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think of you.
Mm-hmm.
So how'd you get to this point?
Well, there's many paths, but the Reader's Digest version, I would say, is when my mom was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. When I entered graduate school to study nutrition, I kind of just went down a path of exploring autoimmunity and learning more about it, because she wasn't getting the help she needed with her disease with conventional medicine. And that's a common story that you hear a lot with people. And if you've been down that road with your own illness, you probably already know how that goes. So that's what inspired me to explore more about autoimmunity and how to help people with alternative medicine. And then I just created the business, the Autoimmune Revolution, and we focus mostly on Hashimoto's, but mostly it's all women's health in general. And then that kind of evolved into integrating trauma and early adult stress and those sort of things, because they go hand in hand, and it's very, very prevalent now to have two of those situations coexist, and they feed into each other, and it's all part of the mind-body medicine thing that I do. And so I spend a lot of my time actually on that. And working.
And a lot of this stemmed from like wanting to help your mom from a young age, and like seeing that was not being addressed properly in the world. And then I later had insight that told me that my own personal story and experiences with relationships and my upbringing had a part of it as well that motivated me to do it. But it was so that's kind of something that came later. But primarily it was my mom. Yeah, that's amazing, man. So let's talk about that. I think this is absolutely the shit that you don't learn in college, right?
It is.
Like the health and wellness space, the autoimmune space, like autoimmune issues have been growing drastically. Like it seems like everybody knows somebody who has you know, Hashimoto's or PCOS or lupus or something, right? And it's just getting worse and worse. Like, what? Can you tell me why? Like, what's going on?
Well, we know it's not genes, because genes don't change that fast in 70, 80 years. So it's definitely the environment.
Takes a few 100,000 million years to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we know the research has kind of pointed that out, that it's, you know, don't quote me on this, but like 85% lifestyle. And so genes, you know, these diseases, or the risk for them rather, they're not predetermined. But they conditions predispose you to getting them. So it's the same with ADHD and autism and bipolar and mental health illness as well. So I actually speak about that and include those conditions as well, because it definitely applies to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all these
Yeah.
other things that we are seeing a lot.
So what you're saying is you can be predisposed to this stuff
Yeah.
from your genes,
Mm-hmm.
but and I won't quote you,
Yeah.
but I'm going to quote you as saying 85% of
Roughly,
it is lifestyle,
Mhm.
and that's the whole idea of like epigenetics. You can switch these flips up or off, right?
Yeah. Right, and so the thing I've been really heavily focused on now is how trauma and adverse childhood experiences and even intergenerational trauma has a big role in this. This is what probably is setting the foundation for this stuff, because that's where it all begins, right? It's not because we ate gluten last week or McDonald's last month.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't happen that way. It takes many years for these sort of issues to acquire.
The McDonald's might be the straw that broke the camel's back.
It's usually what it is.
But there were pounds of bricks on the camel to begin with.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really interested in that dynamic and aspect of health, because it gets very much overlooked and unaddressed and under-recognized, and so people are really surprised. They don't even realize they have stuff going on in their past because they were so good at numbing it out, repressing, suppressing, and et cetera. So, that's another thing that's growing too, is trauma and stress, and then that feeds easily into the physiology. So I think that's, obviously there's more than one thing that creates these illnesses, but that's a big chunk of the pie that I'm finding, and the research actually points that out.
So you mentioned trauma and stress, and I want to talk about that. What are the other areas that might add to this lifestyle issue that create this illness? Yeah,
I mean, it's clearly the environment and our agriculture, and
so agriculture and nutrition being part of it.
Yeah, right, and the pollutants and the chemicals and the obviously the diet, obviously, and I mean, those things are real for sure. But I think that, and I will say this kindly, but I think the alternative medicine space puts a lot of attention into that and ignores the mental, emotional stuff.
Right.
And they want to attribute like your diabetes to arsenic, or this new parasite you got to, the reason why you have IBS or whatever. I mean, yes, that's part of it, but it's like, or nutrition deficiencies are the reason why you have thyroid issues. I'm like, no, it's not that. It's really...
It's not going to help.
No, it's not, but it's not the primary driver.
Right.
And so that's why I'm like trying to be the guy that's shining a light on the other things that really are not getting addressed enough.
Well, let's talk about that then. I think that's really important, because you and I have had this conversation long before today, right?
Yeah.
Around, basically the mind-body connection, how your psyche, your subconscious, that 95% of your brain, connects and it runs the rest of your body. So could you explain to me, like, how like you mentioned, these traumas or stressors how is that affecting these issues and creating this problem? Yeah, so I mean, if you think about it, it starts off with childhood and really even before then in utero, and that's one of the things that we find is that if really before you're born, if the mother is going through stress like my mom was, and this is something that really catalyzed me to do this work, because I was diagnosed, I don't even know if you know this, but I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome when I was 7. I didn't know that. Yeah, it's not one of the things they talk about a lot, but I have been more open about it. My brother and I both were. Thank you for that, by the way. Yeah. And I kind of really ignored it and was like, well, I had it, but I don't know why. I don't really care. And really what I've come to realize is that my mom was stressed throughout her entire pregnancy, even before. Yeah, and she had suicidal ideation, this whole thing. She was in a lot of pain, mentally, physically, emotionally, and I know that is probably the reason why I had those issues, which thankfully I'm no longer dealing with, or no longer with my brother. But, between her experience in utero, right, and we know that being an element, and then, of course, there's, however her parents, my grandparents were living, how they felt, that could be a factor, of course, but... Well, chemically, it makes sense. Like, what she's feeling, what she's going through, you're going to be absorbing, like, even before you're born. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, all those hormones, everything that she's going through, like, you're going to be experiencing that as, like, before you've even become a full human. Yeah, right, exactly. And so that's one element, of course. And then really it's after you're born, this is probably the most biggest factor is the interaction and relationship between the parent and the child. Yeah. And that's where if there's some sort of disconnect and developmental trauma, as they call it, relational trauma, the child is not cared for or loved and given attention and is crying all the time, and then that's an opportunity for kids to have mental health issues, actually, like ADHD and depression, anxiety later in life. They have no idea why. Yeah. And no one really seems to connect that dot, and they think it's, well, because you just had a bad day, and like, it's not that simple. Yeah. Right? So
yeah, I mean, those are the major areas that I talk about is just intergenerational and epigenetic changes and in utero, and then the relationship when you're born.
When you're young, yeah.
So, that answer the question, I think?
A little bit. So I think the question that I have is like, okay, this is all creating a lot of like mental stuff. How does that then extend to, let's say, an autoimmune disorder?
Oh, right. Sorry. So, yeah, because
you should be sorry.
That's just...
So but it's okay. I'll forgive you. Don't worry, man.
I'll try again next time. So that... Yeah,
we'll blame the Tourette's, Justin. Don't worry. Yeah.
So that changes the whole physiology, right?
Yeah.
Operating going forward, and the whole stress response, and you have changes in hormones in your immune system, and you know, with sex hormones and cortisol and this and that and the other. So it really, they call it biological embedding. So it really primes and hardwires the stress response in a certain way to be hyperreactive, hypervigilance, maybe, you know, these sort of different patterns. And then you add in the daily life of stress and the pandemic, and that just adds fuel to the fire, but you're also a hyper responder. And so my argument...
And social media and Instagram, like peaking your dopamine and cortisol hits constantly.
Right, and then you start freaking out because there's someone, you know, naked in the yard, and you have a stress response.
We were, by the way, that didn't just come out of nowhere. We were just talking about my interview with Ryan Mulvaney a couple episodes back, and we had a naked man outside of the studio. Yeah. So if you're interested in closing that loop, you can go listen to the Ryan Mulvaney interview a couple episodes back.
Right. But you know what I mean? You get stimulated with all these different things, and you're really sensitive, and you're irritated and annoyed about someone, you know, rear-ending me or tailgating me.
Yeah.
And the package in from the UPS guy showed up late or whatever.
Right. It said it would be here between 2 and 4, and I have to go to dinner, and now I can't get it.
Right. And so we do that to ourselves, but that's something that can really compound the issue. Right?
Yeah.
And so, so this is what changes the whole cascade creates a whole cascade of issues in the body. And then you know, one thing I said actually at the beginning of the pandemic was that, you know, 2020 is really, it stands for PTSD. It's not a disorder, it's a syndrome. It's something disordered about it, but you know, because of the fact that we already have traumas and stressors in the past, maybe, and then we have this on top of it, and then we're gonna have all these symptoms later in life, back pain and headaches and migraines and autoimmunity and infertility, and we're not gonna know why. And I'm like, well, what happened in 2020? How did you deal with it? Just as an example. So, you know, it's just...
So a lot of this is stemming from stress, it sounds like.
Every disease condition has a component of stress, but whether or not it's physical, biochemical, or mental or emotional, my argument is that probably 95% or more has an emotional, mental... I mean, anybody I've ever worked with, or with cancer for that matter, absolutely has stress and trauma.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen any other way.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So, and you and I have talked about this before, because obviously we do a lot of like psychosomatic work, and Maddie, my wife, specializes in deep trauma, and we've worked with men and women where, you know, we're going after their trauma from a business standpoint, and we'll find people's Hashimoto's symptoms start to lessen as we're working through their trauma. And I'm not pretending to be the expert, right? But I'm I'm just doing what people are telling me. I'm just repeating what people are telling me is going on. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, how does that correlate?
In what way?
Like overcoming these traumas, can you start to help heal people's Hashimoto's or different autoimmune disorders?
Well, let me give you an example of a client of mine I had who had Hashimoto's, and she had seen, you know, a dozen doctors, 2 therapists, and I work with a lot of women who have seen many therapists and haven't done much for them. And not to say they're all bad or like that, but there is some sort of issue with it, obviously, in how they're doing things. And so, and you know, she wasn't getting very far, and I spent literally 6 months with her working on trying to change her perfectionism, being a super mom, super wife, trying to control everything, and these are coping responses to adversity, and from, you know, being a workaholic, trying to be
essentially it's coming down to seeking control and approval.
Yeah, exactly. But that seeking and that pursuit of that is very stressful to the body. So we spent a lot of time, half a year, doing that, and I knew she had other issues like infections, and I could sense the mold that she was probably dealing with still. But I was like, you know, it's not going to do you any good if we dive into that without addressing the stress and trauma.
Yeah.
So we did that, and I mean, literally, it was like a 9-day difference in terms of her responses to the other interventions that we did. So that was like a big, insightful moment for me. And I thankfully she trusts me on that because you know, up to that point.
It sounds very weird, to be honest, right?
Yeah.
It's like, that's really weird to think about, that
Yeah.
like, that's the thing that's going to help me with my symptoms that everybody else is telling me. All the doctors are telling me that I can't heal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There's definitely you can completely unburden and overcome these things and decondition. It just takes a lot of time and effort. And honestly, if it's a choice, if you're not willing to do it, it doesn't really matter what I give you. And that's why I'm not a great fit for anyone, or not everyone's ever going to get better, because if you're not willing to step into that, it's not swallow this, do this protocol, and
it's not the easy pill that the doctor will give you.
Yeah.
It's, like if you're trying to fix what's been going on for decades, right?
So I've come to realize that people will only do it if they're really at their wit's end, I think, usually, or they're really, really, they care about preventative medicine, and they can care. So
how, my question to you is, like, because I love what you do, and I think it's so important. How do we get that type of mentality to more people? That like, this stuff, you can fix this stuff. What the traditional doctors are telling you is not necessarily the end all be all. Like, how do we get that out to the world?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I'm trying to do every day. I think it's hard.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer exactly. I share a lot of case studies and empirical data I have with my clients and what I've done. And honestly, I think it's just like a slow grind, and people will eventually see that, well, what they've been doing for the past 10, 15, 20 years has not worked. And it's a lot of the same thing, just a different color, different texture. It's just like, here's another protocol, here's another supplement. And so I think and I'm the type of person now where I'm like, hey, I'm not going to force you to do this or say you have to do this and not that.
Yeah.
There's room for all of it. It's just where you're putting your attention, what are you prioritizing? And I think people will eventually come around and see that, this is obviously creating a lot of damage in my life, and my quality of life is rapidly diminishing. And then you weave in like sort of the deeper connections that people have with their purpose, or if they have one or not, and their kids and things that matter to them, what's sacred and valuable to them, and you integrate the spiritual health stuff. So that's what I try to do, and get people to see, like, this is more than about you.
Yeah. And
if you can see that, then maybe there's a bigger incentive to want
to pursue.
You
might have some fire and some drive to really.
So I kind of go from that angle, not like everybody sucks, so stop doing that, do this, right?
You have to have the want, you have to have the drive, and from there we can start to work on it.
Yeah.
I love that. So let's say I am that person that has, maybe I've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's for 10 years or something like that, or PCOS or ADHD or something that I'm struggling with. What are maybe a couple of the first things that you would suggest somebody to start to do to open themselves up to this, rather than just relying on what they've heard from doctors so far?
Well, honestly, and that's the thing, if you're going to be open to a different solution, you have to be aware of the truth of the matter and how you got here. So that's the question. How did you get here? What's your story? And that's narrative medicine. And if people can see this, and a lot of people don't, because they don't ever have this question presented to them, or supported in exploring their history, then they can start to see, like, wow, okay, maybe this is explaining why I'm acting this way, and these behaviors are a result of the story that I told myself and my experiences and the thoughts and emotions that I've had that were kind of buried in the psyche. So if people can see this, and I've had many conversations with people who really they clicks, and they're like, wow, holy shit, I didn't know that this is what happened. Like,
you walk yourself through the story to see where.
And then that becomes the reason for why they want to do something different.
Yeah.
Because I can show them, like, hey, this is actually why you're in this predicament.
Yeah.
But it's all about, like, your story. What happened since you were born? What happened to your parents? And I have these conversations all the time. I was speaking to somebody recently who was a ballet dancer, and she lost her period when, for many, many years. And then she did CrossFit and this, that, and the other. And I said, okay, and I can already see why you have this disease and all this, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not the only thing, but it's what got the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And then you look at, like, how your parents treated you, and it's difficult because when you go through trauma, we're so good at numbing it out, dissociating, and we lose the ability to remember. That's part of
that's a defense. It's a defense mechanism. Like, we want to shove it back, and we want to forget about it. Yeah.
So to get people to be like, well, tell me if you have trauma or not, and they say no, it's not because they're lying, it's because they actually don't know.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other element that we have to help uncover, and that's not really my job to do that, but I can assist in that process. But anyway, so the whole idea is exploring their history and seeing how they got here, and you know, the biography biology timeline is something I talk about a lot, which is really just try to drawing out, you know, the major events that you can think about in your life that were pretty significant, like you were sexually abused, you had binge eating going on in your life, you went through divorce, you lost somebody in your family, you were touched inappropriately, you know, you grew up in an alcoholic family, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And
divorce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And not to say that's traumatic because it's all relative and self-identified, but if you go through an experience, that can eventually you can sit with it enough, and sometimes we have that sort of arrival of an insight to say, yeah, maybe there's some shame and unworthiness, inadequacy, and fear or anger there that I didn't know was there. And I can tell you that happened to me with some things I didn't know. And I was
until you started to explore it, right?
And get support. It's not easy to do it on your own. You really can't. So that's why you need to be guided. But that's the first step, because without that awareness, there's nothing else matters.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the way that you put it too, the narrative timeline of it all. Because I think about, you know, like Maddie struggled with PCOS for many years, and if you go back through the timeline, it was like her parents got divorced, and then I think she got mono, and then they put her on a bunch of antibiotics, and she did like 10 rounds of antibiotics in like 18 months or something like that. And then after that was when, you know, and it was like that, and then her boyfriend cheated on her, and like all of these things like happened within a short timeline, and it just like compounded and compounded, and then obviously she struggled with that disease for many years afterwards, right? But it's like you go back and you start to see why, and it's like, okay, like this starts to make a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Exactly.
So
once they're aware, is there anything that like anybody can do to start to work through it, or is it just like sit and pray?
Yeah, you know, just get a crystal ball and just figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, once you're aware of like the story and the experience.
Obviously, like by the way, for like anybody, if you have autoimmune issues, like check out Justin's stuff. Like you may just want to work with him because like he can do a lot of this stuff very deeply, and I can say from firsthand experience, like you've got great shit.
Yeah, thank you. My book, by the way, talks about what I'm saying. So it's called The Flexible Dieting Disaster.
Yeah. On
Amazon, but I share this because even though it's in the context of the fitness industry and binge or eating disorders and macros and flexible dieting, it still applies.
Yeah.
That's another response to trauma and stress, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like that, but. So once you're aware, you really need to revisit. We need to reassess and kind of to see like what's again exploring the pains and what emotions are there, and that's not always easy because sometimes you might need hypnotherapy and EMDR and these other modalities. You know, it's all relative to the person.
There's all the deep fun shit that I really like.
Right, right, and that's not stuff I do, but thankfully I've in my experience I've found that we can help people do that without those sort of things. But some people need it, and it's fine. There's no right or wrong. It's about just integrating different things. And then after that, then it's about how to reprogram, how to decondition, here's
deconditioning the brain,
right,
and reconditioning a different way,
right. And there's so many things, honestly. And people always ask me, well, how do you heal trauma? I'm like, honestly, I don't know. There's like imagine you got a canvas, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna paint this canvas. And you've got a palette of 50 colors. I'm like, hey, what color you want to use today? Dark blue? Okay, I'll show you dark blue.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I like that. That's good. Then next week you try some, yellow. You're like, okay, do some yellow. And you're like, nah, I'm not really feeling that. Try red next week. You're like, okay, I like this. So now you got blue, you like red, you like yellow, you don't. And you just start to play with it. It's like literally throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Yeah.
And I don't know. You don't know what's going
to say. You got to test it out until you figure out what's.
And no one likes that because it's very uncertain. It's not very straightforward. Week 1 we do this, week 2 we do this.
Yeah.
It's really open. You have
to test. Yeah.
And that takes a lot of patience and trust. And if you don't have that, which is what I say, that's the prerequisite for success and healing, then you might not really get very far.
Yeah.
But we can't go into this with a sort of fixated idea and expectation of I have to get here by this date and it has to look like this.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's a failure, and it doesn't work that way. Healing is there's no paint by numbers process. It's just not. I wish it were that, but it's not.
Yeah.
So that's really the general idea of what we're doing. It's just help people use different tools and techniques.
Yeah.
To explore that and trust in the process.
Yeah.
Not being attached.
I love that, man. So you're obviously an expert in the body, the mind-body connection, human hormones, everything like that. Like, I'm interested in how you take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, what are your health routines?
It shifted a little bit over the past year, I would say, but for me, it's a lot of reinforcement. And this is actually the most important thing I would say too, is once you've overcome and unburdened and healed your stuff, it's not like when you, like, as if you reach your body composition, you don't like stop going to the gym or eating well.
Yeah,
you have to maintain it.
You have to keep it.
So you have to keep the neural patterns, firing in a certain loop, right? Otherwise you might fall off track. And so for me, it's a lot of reinforcing, getting to that high elevated state and having a vibration that's going to create heart rate coherence and, having joy and blessing, gratitude, appreciation. And, again, it's all specific to the person, but like reinforcing thoughts and ideas and feelings and emotions and experiences and meditation and visualization practices that I'll do in the morning to make sure that I don't fall in the trap. And it might happen. It's not about avoiding it completely, and you might take a step back here and there in the future, but just doing the best you can. But if you've got the right
safety nets to pull you back in and keep you going, you'll be good.
Yeah, right. It's just about trying to, hardwire everything again and making sure that they don't sever. And that's what I do, and it doesn't take a lot of time, but it's like, for me, that's all I need to do. But for someone else, it might need more time and practice, and it's all, based around your experience.
What do you think for your routines, what do you think is the most important thing for you?
Right now, it's definitely, this is like Joe Dispenza stuff, honestly, but he speaks more about this, but it's really the visualization stuff and having an intention and emotional experience. Because we do affirmations and we say, I'm worthy,
but if you're not
I love myself.
Right?
Then you start to really, and I've made this argument, is that you're kind of lying to yourself. Your subconscious mind saying, like, no, you're not worthy. Remember what happened back when we were 8 years old? Like, like that part of you that's speaking. So, like, part of to get you to that place, and this is even good even when you're in pain and trauma, is to experience like what the it can be tricky, it doesn't always work this way, but you can experience have an idea of feeling and experiencing something before it happens, because that's something you can do, and if you could do that, you're more likely to make it happen. Right. If you want to have $1 million, you gotta just like if you imagine having that money right now in your bank account,
how it would feel,
you're more likely to get it, right?
Yeah.
And acting in a certain way. So in a similar way with health and your how you want to feel, and you feel adequate and worthy and lovable and all that stuff. That's what I do. But anything that gets you to that place of the high vibration, and this is my point, because all those thoughts and emotions are energy, and that's going to change physiology. You can't. This is my whole thing with autoimmune healing and disease, that you can't do these protocols with changing matter with matter, as he puts it, Dr. Joe, that is, and if you don't have a fertile ground to plant a flower in. Because imagine growing a flower in the desert. That's what you're doing with the toxic mind, with shame and fear and anger, versus something that's got a ground of lush grass and water and sunlight, and has feelings of joy and bliss and gratitude. So that's what I'm trying to do for myself. Whether or not I think I need it, I do it anyway, because then it will change me and how I operate throughout the day.
I love that, man. Let me ask you this. Obviously, you spent some time in university becoming educated. What's one thing that you wish you learned in school?
Like anything?
Anything.
I think, honestly, a discussion around meaning and purpose, and there are a couple things, but I think that's a big one. Like,
Could you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, like, having a job and going to school to get a degree, to get a job is nice, but that might be meaningful, but is it purposeful? And if not, how do we kind of figure that out? How do we break that down? Now, I think it's something you create, of course. It's not, you decide what that is, but we need to have a discussion. I think it'd be nice to have that discussion around.
I think it'd be nice to have that discussion before you decide what you're actually going to spend the rest of your life doing, right?
And that's actually the irony, is that, you should do this before you even get into school.
100%, right? But I always think it's hilarious. Like, I was told to pick my degree when I went to UCLA. I was told to pick my degree as an 18-year-old kid, right? When I had no idea what the shit that I wanted from life, other than girls and a nice cold beer. Right? So it's like, that's hilarious to me. Like, why don't we have this discussion earlier?
like high school maybe, but
Yeah.
even still, I think it's hard because we're not really our prefrontal cortex hasn't been fully established yet.
Yeah.
All these things we don't.
Right, especially as guys, it establishes lower or later, right?
Right,
so it's
right.
like not till we're like 27 or something.
Right, exactly. So I don't know. It's tough because if you do it too early, you may not have the wisdom or whatever, the awareness or want to care enough, and that's why it's tricky, I think. But so where that fits in your life, I don't know. But the whole idea about like getting some sort of discussion and clarity around like how to explore that would be incredibly valuable, I think.
Yeah.
And then, because that's going to drive your fulfillment and joy. It's not going to happen for money or the car you just bought. Those are all transient sort of feelings of happiness, So that's why I do this stuff for my, the work in the field I'm in, because that's what brings joy and fulfillment, right?
So I think you do a great job of like, every time we're talking, you're doing something new, you're in a new city, and you're like really following like your joy, and you're following your passion and your purpose. How do you do that? Is that just who you are? Is this just taking a lot of work for you? Like,
I think I think it happens naturally now, but it wasn't that way for a while because I'm with a lot of heartbreak and a lot of issues romantically with things like that when I was in LA, and then I left LA, moved to Texas, and that's when things changed.
Yeah.
So I knew that I had a big role in it because the environment, I had a lot of memories with it. So like I had to get out of that space. So you just know. And so I think after that, I saw how much peace and freedom I had being in a new place and feeling this and choosing to feel this. That is what
you started to reinforce, like you were talking about.
Right. So that's what I think kept the drove it forward, so that I can honestly don't have to try so hard. It just kind of happens naturally, right?
Yeah.
And that's because I created that from the beginning, I think.
I love that, man. You've mentioned several times that money won't bring you joy or happiness, right? So if you were to name maybe one or two things that's more important than money, what would they be?
Serving others in some capacity.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, being generous and being loving to other people, everybody, every human species in the world. I mean, I think it's a gift that anybody can give.
Yeah.
So
you don't have to be rich. Doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing. You can give that love and gratitude.
Just being of service to somebody in some capacity, which isn't just about seeing the opportunity when it arises. I think that's it.
Dude, this has been amazing, man. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but what's coming up next on the docket for Justin, and where can people learn more about you?
Cool. So my website is the autoimmunerevolution.com. That's where we have our team of coaches and myself with all the things that we offer. But the latest thing, I was telling you earlier, it's the new ebook and the trauma course we just released yesterday with a former client of mine. And that is pretty exciting because it's all connected. It's really speaking on kind of the anxiety, body image issues and things like that, and food issues and unworthiness that a lot of people deal with still. And it ties into everything we just talked about. Honestly, it's just whether or not that manifests as disease or illness is a different story. But but the trauma course is the best, greatest thing for me right now because there was a lot of work to do that. But that really compiles a lot of things I was doing or learning and teaching clients. So that is, I think the website is beginnersguidebook.com/trauma course, because it connects with the ebook, but that takes you directly to the page. But that's really the greatest thing right now.
Awesome. So Autoimmune Revolution, and we'll get you guys the link for the trauma course. But dude, this has been great. Thank you, man.
Always. Thank you, man.
Awesome. Thanks, boss.